Welcome to this space, this sanctuary of peace where we come to not only create our best selves, but to also do the work of creating a beloved community. We come together today as individuals, much like individual pieces of glass or pottery that are different shapes, sizes, colors, all of which are broken with imperfect, jagged edges, but always beautiful. While our pieces may not always fit neatly together, it is within this sanctuary, guided by our principles, that we gather together to create a beautiful mosaic. May the brokenness and beauty you find in one another create space and peace in this space, and fill our hearts with love as we create worship together. Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Los Alamos. I'm the Reverend John Cullinan, your minister here. As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people and gather together in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are at this moment, wherever you are on your life's journey, you are welcome to be a part of this community. I extend a special welcome this morning to any visitors or first-time guests we have among us. I would love to meet you after the service for coffee and conversation in the fellowship hall, introduce myself, answer any questions you may have about our community here. And now would you all please rise in body or spirit and join in our opening hymn number 358.
Since this is a new hymn, Kathy and I are going to play it through once, and then we invite you to sing.
Please remain standing and join in our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve life in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each and with all. Please be seated. For all our joys, all our sorrows, whether we share them aloud with one another or we hold them close and quiet in our hearts, let us be together in a moment of silence. Spirit of life, gracious source of all love, we come together this morning grateful for this time out of time, which we have set apart so that we might become more fully present to our own selves, to one another, to our communities, to that which we call holy. May our joys be celebrated together, our wounds be healed together, our hearts be opened together. Spirit that moves in all things, great mystery whose reach spans beyond the cold, distant edges of our universe, and yet is present within the vast subatomic emptiness, coursing through every fiber and every breath of our being, and through being itself. Help us to see the miracle in the mundane, to see the crystal stars, the shape-shifting clouds, the patient trees, to see each other through fresh eyes. For it is so easy to forget what we truly are and what we have been given. As we move through our lives, let us remember to see through the mundane to the miracle beneath, and to perceive that common substance that gives birth to our myriad forms, that mystery that spans beyond the edges of the universe, and yet infuses our next breath. And let this foundational awareness guide us on our paths as we work towards peace and fight for justice, while always informed by a spirit of compassion. All this we pray in the names of those known and unknown, present and absent, remembered and forgotten, in the names of all the helpers of humankind. Amen. Our story this morning comes from my colleague, the Reverend Erik Wikstrom, A Day at the Lawn. Once upon a time, there was a girl named Wendy. She loved grass. She loved the feel of it between her toes. She loved the smell of it when it was freshly mown. She loved its bright green color. Wendy loved grass more than just about anything. One day, her family decided to go to the beach. Wendy wasn't too sure about it. "Come on," said her older brother. "We can go swimming, and we can collect rocks and shells together," said her mom. "And you can bury me in the sand," said her dad. It sounded like fun, so they all piled into the car and off they went. When they got to the beach, it sure looked great, like nothing Wendy had ever seen. But when she first touched the sand, it was way, way, way too hot. "This isn't cool like grass," she said. "I wish this sand was grass," she cried. Now, Wendy had a good luck fairy who followed her all around, and he heard her wish and decided to grant it. With a flash, all of the sand turned into grass. Now it was her family's turn to be not too sure. Wendy, of course, was delighted. "I guess I won't get buried today," said Dad. "That's okay," said Mom. "Let's collect some shells." Everyone went down to where the water lapped the edge of the grass. There were polished rocks and beautiful shells lying all around. They all set to work looking for the shiniest or the biggest or the most colorful. Everyone except Wendy. "Ouch," she said. "Ooch, eek." The rocks and shells hurt her feet, and as soon as she did, her good luck fairy, who could hear her thoughts as well as her words, made it so. The rocks and shells turned to grass as well. The family looked at one another. "Well," they said, "at least there's swimming." Everybody laid their beach towels on the grass and changed into their bathing suits. "Last one in is rotten egg," Wendy's older brother cried, and he ran into the waves, followed closely by Wendy's sister, their delighted squeals trailing behind. Wendy followed tentatively, but when her toe touched the water, she said, "Yuck! Too wet and too cold." This time she didn't even have to think it. The fairy changed the water into grass without her even having to ask for it. Everyone turned to her and said, "Wendy." But what was she to do? But her family was very understanding. They were, after all, Unitarian Universalists. So they decided to try to make the best of it. "Let's have lunch," said Mom and Dad. So they got out their picnic basket, found a nice spot on the now wide lawn, spread out the checkered cloth, and they all set to it. Wendy was in heaven. After all, didn't she love grass more than just about anything? But she had to admit she was beginning to feel a bit bored, and something just didn't feel right. After all, everywhere she looked, there was nothing but grass. And all of the sounds of the beach, the waves and the seagulls, all of it, that had gone too. Grass was nice, but maybe not so much when that's all that there was. "Well," said her mom, "we went to the beach and we're at a lawn. This isn't the way it's supposed to be." "What do you mean?" Wendy asked. Her dad said, "You made it all the same. The sand, the rocks, the water, each was different, and you made them the same because their differences made you feel uncomfortable. But those differences also made them feel special and beautiful, and without them, there's a whole lot missing. In fact, everything that makes this place what it is missing. And that means that you are missing out on everything you really came here for." Wendy thought about this for a while. She did want to collect rocks and shells. She'd seen some really beautiful ones. And the water was cold, but her brother and sister looked like they were having a lot of fun too. And the idea of burying her father in sand was too good to pass up. "I wish it was all back the way it was," she thought. And the good luck fairy made her wish come true. Wendy and her family had the best time that day. She still loves grass more than just about anything, but she's learned to love other things too. And she's come across some things that she doesn't like much, and that's okay too. But she's never, ever wanted everything to be the same again, because she knows that things are supposed to be different, each thing as it is, and that exploring new things makes life so much more fun. So, John, why are you a Unitarian Universalist anyway? I mean, what is this thing? As far as I can tell, that's a church where nobody agrees about anything. Disagreement happens all the time. There's no easy answers about life. Everybody believes everything or nothing or some combination of the two things. And every time we ask you specific questions about your church, your answer is always yes and no. And it's really frustrating. So why? Why are you part of this thing that is so hard for me to comprehend? Why am I a Unitarian Universalist? My joke answer is that 25 years ago, it was the only church that Jess and I could agree on. And that is true, but it is not the full story. What's the truth to the answer? I gave myself this topic because I thought it would be a nice, light, easy thing to write after a week of being at General Assembly. Ha ha ha. Let me attack this from 3 points of view. First, why I am a Unitarian Universalist, because of what UUism is not. I was Unitarian Universalist aware from a very young age, going to coffee houses in the basement of the parish in my hometown. It was always very intriguing, but I was a dyed-in-the-wool Roman Catholic, and the church that I attended was the sort of church where the rubber met the road, where actions followed beliefs, or at the very least, that's the way that my parents instilled Catholicism in me. But then I went to a Catholic university and I walked away from the home parish that I had lived so long in, and I encountered two instances that started giving me a change of heart and soul. First was the disconnect between words and between actions. The motto of my Jesuit university was Cura Personalis, care for the person, care for each person. And at the same time that this was emblazoned on streetlight banners up and down the avenue where the university was located, some of us were campaigning to get sexual orientation added to the non-discrimination clause of the university. We collected way more than enough signatures to get listened to. And then the response from the administration was this: we'd like to, but we'd alienate so many of our donors. We just can't do it. I started having some reservations around then. And then this happened. I was a theater student, and the year I began, the film of Peter Brook's stage adaptation of the Mahabharata, the great Hindu epic, came out on PBS, and I watched it minute after minute, and I taped it on my VCR, and I rewatched it because it was fascinating. And it was fascinating first just to watch how he staged things, because theater brain was watching it that way, but faith brain was having a completely different experience at the time, and it was this: I recognize so much of what I understand my own faith to be tucked away in these stories. There are things happening here that are not so different from how I'm called to live and be in the world. Maybe God speaks to everyone in their own language. Maybe everyone hears God in their own language and interprets what they hear through their own culture. And if that's the case, who am I to say that my one way is the only one way? I've been seriously considering the Jesuit priesthood at that point, but once my spirit was infused with that realization, I realized they were going to kick me out of seminary within a week. So out the door went that plan. I walked away from church for several years after that, not knowing where else to go. And then Jess and I had kids, and none of our peer group had kids, and we needed to go someplace where we could meet other parents. So we decided church sounded like a good place, and the U Church was the only one we could agree on. There is truth in the joke. And what I found within the walls, rather suddenly and developing over the years, was the via positiva of why I've become and stayed a Unitarian Universalist. First, it reawakened all of those faith longings within me, things I hadn't realized I had missed. But right after that was this realization: diversity in belief was just a thing that happened. People believed differently from one another, and in a church with 450 members, that was a lot of people to have all kinds of different disagreements. And sometimes all those disagreements were out in the open and debated about. And despite the disagreement, people still showed up. People came for the disagreement and for the openness to believe what they must. Followed by this was the realization that with such a diversity of beliefs, there were very few certainties that we could all agree on. And really, one of the only certainties that a people of diverse beliefs could agree on in one room was this: we get this life together. We know that for certain. And so, the faith in action of the church was aimed earthward. It was orthopraxy rather than orthodoxy, to pull out the seminary words. It was a search for the right way of being and doing rather than the right way of believing. Unlike so many other churches which tried to profess a faith that was somehow not of this world, somehow above this world, that a faithful people were supposed to be separate from the world that they existed in, Unitarian Universalism, at least as I was experiencing it, was centered in the world, inhabited it, relished it, wanted to be part of it, and wanted it to be better. The world was not depraved in the eyes of Unitarian Universalism. In fact, it was beloved, a beloved creation. And unlike the select few of a Calvinistic Christianity, every person had inherent worth and dignity. And because the church was in the world and active in the world, and because there was disagreement and debate happening all the time, this faith that I had chosen listened to the times and responded to it. Not with some sort of unchanging doctrine that was force-fed into the issues at hand to try to find some eternal answer, but met with a willingness to be changed, to adapt to the times, to understand what was transient and what was permanent in faith. To quote our ancestor, I blanked on his name, God bless America. A willingness to change and adapt. And so what I walked into was a faith that was not dogmatic, did not pronounce one true way about anything. Unitarian Universalism couldn't be dogmatic if it tried, because we don't have just a single text that we're drawing everything out of. That's impossible to do when the text of Unitarian Universalism is life itself and everything that is produced because of it, art and science. Rather than dogmatic, I found it to be a two-way conversation rather than a one-way dictation. Unitarian Universalists were constantly in conversation with the values and the history and the practices of the church and the vision for the future, all of that in conversation with our lived experiences of being in the world as an individual and our shared experiences together. And in that wrestling, in that conversation, was the adjusting and the adapting and the evolving. Changing how we practiced our faith and expressed it in ways that honored how our knowledge of life and the world expanded over time. Unitarian Universalism is much less expressed like the authors of a catechism and more like the rabbis over the century in the Jewish tradition arguing with ancestors back and forth in the Talmud and with one another about what meant what given the times they were each living in. And that's part of how we practice our faith as well. We are writing notes in the margins and questions and arguments with Emerson and Channing, with A. Powell Davies, with our principles and trying to figure out what they mean. We are writing notes in the margins of our orders of service every week while this guy talks. I've seen it happen. Asking always, what does this mean for now? What does this 200-year-old statement mean now? Does it mean anything anymore? Is this a transient thing we can let go of because we need to pull the core values and express them differently and practice them differently? Unitarian Universalism is a faith that acknowledges the transience of life and history and seeks to carry out what is essential in our faith together in new ways into new times. I am a Unitarian Universalist because our faith wrestles with itself. It does not practice itself unquestioningly. It wrestles with itself and the world that it lives in, seeking always to better serve and live out our values. I'm a Unitarian Universalist because that wrestling keeps us engaged with the world constantly and not above it, not separate from it. And as a result, leads us to celebrate the diversity amongst us rather than deride it, or worse, call it sinful. I am a Unitarian Universalist because that wrestling allows for my own wrestling within, with my beliefs, with the way I act with the world, with the self that I am trying to be, with the constant and unanswered question of who am I really? And it gives me room to lean into those facets of myself that are speaking to me in the moment, connecting with the times, speaking to me and necessarily in the world that I am experiencing. I'm a Unitarian Universalist because all of that external wrestling and internal wrestling allows me the space to be the whole person, without reservations and without apologies. In my Unitarian Universalist church, when I first joined it, I didn't have to hide any of who I was. I didn't have to make choices about I was going to be this kind of person, that kind of man, this kind of man. I could be everything I was experiencing. It allowed me the space to be whole and gave me the grace to screw up constantly. I'm a Unitarian Universalist because we understand that mistakes are baked into the system, and we learn as much from those as we do from perfect action. I'm a Unitarian Universalist despite all the wrestling and the disagreement, despite the lack of anything easy. Because of that lack, because of all that wrestling, despite all of it, the faithful keep showing up, keep coming to the table, stay in the struggle, adapt and evolve. And those are the people that I want to be a part of. Those are my people. I'm a Unitarian Universalist because I cannot give up on them, on us, on a faith that does not stand still. May it be so. As we prepare to return to our everyday lives, it is time to give something of the gifts of this congregation back to the larger community we are part of. It is time for our offering. During the month of July, all cash and undesignated funds that we collect will be given to our friends at Strong in Nature. Strong in Nature is dedicated to healing survivors of domestic and sexual abuse through nature and adventure programs. You may give through the basket today, through our Givelify app, through the box in the back. 100% of all that we collect will be given to Strong in Nature. The offering will now be accepted. May what you give bring you joy and a deeper relationship with this community. Important announcements and upcoming events can be found on the back page of your order of service, in the calendar on our website, at our Facebook page, or on our monthly newsletter, The Voice. Just a few to highlight this week. First, we had great success with our info table at Pride Fest. We were quite popular, and the glitter blessing was lovely, and it's always great when we could be out there just giving information out about ourselves. So we're going to try it at a couple of the summer concerts at Ashley Pond this year as well. We will be, I don't have the dates, Patrick Webb is organizing that. If you are interested in being at the table for one of our scheduled concerts, be in touch with Patrick and he can give you the details. we would love to have you help out in that way. And we'll be doing it again at the county fair this year, as we've done for the last several years, setting up our info table under the tents at Ashley Pond for that as well. And this year, because we haven't done it in several years, I'd like to get us together to march in the parade this time. We haven't done it in quite a while, to carry our banner down the street and march behind it. Maybe have some matching t-shirts, I don't know yet. If you're interested in marching on that Saturday, that's the first Saturday in August, have a talk with me. I'd love to just get a sense of our numbers and see if we can make a good showing for that as well. Internally, we have so many different ways to serve in this church with your time and your talents, and the one I want to highlight this week is our worship committee, the team who helps put together the services when I'm out of the pulpit and lead those services as well. We are always in need of more people who are willing to participate in organizing the services and stand up here to lead portions of it when our pulpit guests are here. We love to see new faces and have you be part of worship in that way. If you are interested in being that, come and have a chat with me as well, or you can talk to Elisa Enriquez, who is on our committee as well. We're happy to answer any of your questions. And finally, our regular Soul Matters groups are on hiatus for the summer. However, I wanted to open up some opportunity for folks who haven't tried it out yet to sit in on a session and get a sense for what it's about, to see if it's something you might like to try on a regular basis when we pick up again in September. So in July and August, we're going to do 2 try-it nights. We will be doing regular sessions the way they're set up for Soul Matters sharing circles. If you're interested, we're going to ask for signing up in advance because we need to limit the group to about 8 people. You'll get the packets from me that have all of the spiritual exercises that happen prior to the meeting sometime during the last week of this month. We're still nailing down what that exact date would be. We'll do it in July. We'll do it again in August. If you're in one of our circles, I'm going to ask you please not to sign up for this. We want to give an opportunity for people to try it out who haven't yet. And again, talk to me about that or send me an email as well. Now, would you all please rise in body or spirit and join in our closing hymn, number 1064. May the light of life shine upon us and out from within us and be gracious to us and bring us peace. For this is the day. This is the one wild and precious life we have been given. So let us all find a way to rejoice and be glad in it. Go in peace.